Hi, I'm Kristin Davis, and I want to know, are you a Charlotte? Hi, everyone. We're back. This is Are You a Charlotte? And we're now looking at Season 1, Episode 2. It's called Models and Mortals. Oh my goodness me. I watched this last night. I'm still in shock. I have more questions than I have answers. There's a lot to dig into here. I honestly just don't even I really am not sure what to say about this episode. It's super fascinating though. So let me just kind of go back in time a little bit. Charlotte only has one scene in this episode, and it's a really fun and funny scene that I do have a lot of memories about. And someone asked me, did you remember that you only had one scene? And I didn't remember. And part of the reason that I didn't remember is that one of the things, and I don't really know if we're the only show who does this, we probably aren't, but one of the interesting things about how we film, and this is still true to this day on And Just Like That, is that we cross-board 2 episodes at a time. So we're always filming 2 episodes simultaneously. And part of the reason for that is that locations in New York City are so expensive. So let's say you get a restaurant for the day. That takes, a lot of money. You have to get into all kinds of arrangements. You have to arrange with the mayor's office of location management for parking and for all the trucks. And it's a whole big to-do, right? So if you get a location, you would divide it up. Like, let's say you got a restaurant, you might film in front of the restaurant, and then you might also film a different scene from a different episode inside the restaurant. So, you're kind of cross-purposing those actual locations. So when you're filming 2 episodes at once. Now, sometimes it gets out of hand. Like, I remember one time, maybe season 3 of Sex and the City, towards the end, we had all these unfinished scenes, and we had, I think, 4 units filming, and we had to make t-shirts, different colored t-shirts for the different crews on the different units. And all the actors, we just had to run from soundstage to soundstage to do the different things that we needed to do to finish the episode. Like, that was crazy times. And then just this past year on And Just Like That, I think there was a time when the call sheet had 6 different episodes listed for Charlotte of things that I had to finish. So this particular episode, I have a different storyline for the next episode that I was also doing. So it's not like I was just sitting around the whole time. But I also didn't really remember that I only had the one episode. And my thoughts on that, which, I don't know if we're ever going to find out, you guys, why they tried to demote me, as one of our current writers said. Because, the funny thing about the reaction, there's many funny things about the reaction to the first 2 podcasts. One is that a lot of my closest friends don't even know the stories that I told you guys. They're like, what? And some of our current, very beloved crew members and writers and directors and everybody don't know that story. So everyone's just like, why? What happened? What happened? I don't know if we'll ever know. I really don't know. I don't know the answer to it. I feel, when I look back on it now from the perspective of 27 years later or whatever, having read Candace's book, which was based on Candace's column. And the thing that's important for this particular episode to remember is that Candace's column in The Observer, called Sex and the City, was, I believe, based in true stories that she was hearing and or participating in, but also hearing around town that were true stories, right? So she wouldn't use the names. She might imply who they were, so that if you were like, ran in this circle of friends in New York, you might know who the stories were, but you might also not know and just, read it for some interesting, like, social archaeology, I guess, maybe. I'm going to try not to say like so much, because I did see the comment from one of our listeners that I say like too much. So I just said like. I'm really sorry. I'm going to do my best. It's not going to be easy because I'm just sitting here by myself yakking, okay? But thank you for being with me and understanding. So Candace is writing this column in the 90s in New York City, and she is writing things she's hearing happened or was there for when they happened, or both, or neither, I guess. But, that's the genesis of all of this. So when I watched this episode, episode 2, which was the first episode we filmed once the show had been picked up, I'm assuming that this really insane storyline about this character that Gabriel Macht plays, Barkley, filming these models, I'm just going to go with the fact that this is something Candace heard about that happened and put in her column and thus ended up in her book and thus ended up in our show because Darren Star optioned her book, Sex and the City. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with the fact that they didn't just make this up or whatever for the show. I'm not sure, because at this point also the important thing to remember for me is that the writers were all in Los Angeles. They did not come. We did not know them. Very unlike how the show went on to develop, where the writers were with us every day. The writers were part of our lives. They were very close friends of ours, still are a very close friend of ours. You're going to be meeting them along the way. They're wonderful. These particular group of writers, some of them, I would not know them if I saw them. If I ran into them and they told me I wrote an episode of Sex and the City for the first season, I would just say like, okay, I would believe them because I don't know what they look like. We were in, Los Angeles after the pilot, Darren, myself, and then strangely, Sarah Jessica. This is a funny story. I was renting a house at the time in a little canyon in the west side of Los Angeles, not a particularly popular canyon. And one day I had gotten a puppy and I was walking down the street, and we are in the waiting period of waiting to hear if HBO was going to pick the show up. And I feel like they had 18 months to decide, something like that. Maybe just a year. Whatever it was felt like eternity. And I would call my poor manager, Dave, every day and be like, did you hear anything? Did you hear anything? Did you hear anything? And then I would call my lawyer, Jason, and I would say, did you hear anything? Did you hear anything? And it just went on and on and on, the waiting. And sometimes I think I would call Darren Star and say, like, did you hear anything? I wasn't close enough to Sarah Jessica at this point to have her number to be calling and bugging her, which is probably a good thing. But one day I'm walking down the street in this little neighborhood that I rented a house in, and I'm walking my new puppy, and who drives down this empty street but Sarah Jessica Parker in a rented Lexus? And I'm like, hey, you know what I mean? And she's like, hi, what are you doing here? And I said, I just rented a house over here. What are you doing here? And she said, oh, Matthew's here doing a movie, so I'm here with him while he's filming this movie. And I said, did you hear anything? And she was like, no. And she didn't seem as anxious about it as I was. And I was like, well, what do you think is happening? What was going on? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I don't know. And I said, what, don't you want it to be picked up? And she said something like, yeah, but I could tell she was just trying to please me. You know what I mean? And I thought, oh no, Sarah Jessica doesn't want to do it. I don't know. And I do think now, knowing her all these many, many years, that this was back to her kind of reticence to being committed to a show. Because as I told you before, we did have these massive 7-year long contracts, which is the norm for any kind of pilot. So for her, she'd been kind of just this, journeyman actress in a way, like doing Broadway, doing movies like Honeymoon in Vegas. Most actors don't really want to be committed to one job forever. So anyway, Sarah Jessica, I believe her nervousness was, do I really want to be committed? Do I want to be tied down? It wasn't something that most actors, like you didn't start to be an actor because you wanted to do one job for 30 years. That just wasn't even really a possibility. And obviously for us has turned into this incredible opportunity, but never would we have thought of that at the time. I mean, never. Like, we were just wanting to be picked up for 13 episodes. That was our dream. Like, I remember Darren and I, when we did get picked up, we used to make jokes about how maybe one day we could get nominated for a Cable Ace Award. That was the highest our hopes were. There was this thing, they're gone. They were called the Cable Ace Awards. They were just for shows on cable. Because at that point, no cable show had ever been nominated for an Emmy, much less won an Emmy. So it wasn't even in our mind that could happen. But obviously it did later on happen, which is a miracle. There's so many miracles involved in our show. Anyway, back to this episode. So this episode, to me, is super fascinating for so many different reasons. So we have a different DP at this point. Her name is Maryse Alberti. She's French. And I used to butcher her name all the time. And for any French people, I'm really sorry if I had butchered it again. But she was incredible. And we also have this really interesting director, Allison McLean. Now, what I remember of the first season. Okay, wait. I didn't get to the point that they did finally pick us up, obviously. I guess that's obvious. So maybe like a year of waiting and then we get picked up finally. I also think And when I watch this episode too, I really, really seriously think that, it was a really different time in our culture, certainly in our entertainment landscape. HBO at that point was known for having boxing. Yes, boxing. That was their claim to fame, boxing and movies, right? That was why you paid the hefty price to have HBO pay cable on your television at home, because no one had iPads, because they weren't invented. It's crazy to think about, you guys. Crazy, okay? So they had a show called Dream On HBO, and on Dream On, every episode, a different actress would show her breasts. That was just part of the show. And it was theoretically to please the men who were watching HBO to watch the boxing, I believe. I mean, no one ever said these words to me, but this is what I believe to be true. So I think when we came along, one of the things that I think is super interesting to think about for the first season, nothing had aired yet at this point. And back in the olden days, we used to put a show on the air and see the reaction as it went. Like if you were on, say, for instance, a multi-camera show, you would start filming, they would come on the air, you'd still be filming, right? So you could kind of change and shift based on the audience reaction to things. Back when we started, we filmed the whole 13 without anything ever being on the air, which was really unusual at the time. Now with streaming, people do it all the time. But no one knew what we were doing. We didn't really know what we were doing. I remember that someone made, probably production, I guess, made a hat for us to start. It was like a welcome. You get like swag, right, in the beginning. And it said sex on the front of the baseball cap. And on the back of the baseball cap, it said, and the city. Now, I wore this hat all over Manhattan, okay? So I remember being in a Starbucks one time with my sex hat on, and some man is ahead of me in line, and he turns and he's like, interesting hat. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a show. And he said, oh, and I said, it's a show on HBO. It's a new show. He said, are you on it? And I said, I am. Yeah, I am. And he said, oh, is it real sex? And I was like, no, there was a show on HBO in the wee hours of the morning, you guys, literally basically like porn. Okay. I only saw it once and I was like, what? Oh my God. So this man in the Starbucks thinks that I personally, Kristin, am on this show called Real Sex in the wee hours on HBO. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but I was like, no, it's a comedy. And he was like, oh, and looked like he didn't believe me. So I kind of quit wearing that hat. But this is where we're at this point, right? We're just kind of in a vacuum, So we're operating in a vacuum. We're trying to figure out what we're doing. All the writers are back in Los Angeles. Darren had a writer's room back in LA, which is kind of, like how writers work. They have a writer's room. They pitch ideas. I'm sure they were using Candace's book. Maybe Candace was involved. I don't know. But they have the scripts. And then they already have the scripts when we come to work, basically, or the scripts are primarily done. Michael Patrick King is the person that we will ask about this, because Michael Patrick King's name appears on this episode for the first time. Hallelujah. And we get to talk to him very soon. And man, the list of questions is going to be long, you guys. I mean, so long. Like things that I literally am. I feel like I've never seen the show. When I watch these early episodes, I feel like I don't remember this. I don't know what's happening. I'm fascinated, but wow. So Michael can hopefully answer some of these questions for us. I'm sure that he can. And he is on, his name is on, not as a writer. Darren wrote this episode, but he definitely is on as a co-executive producer. So that's super interesting. So this episode... Gosh, where to begin? This episode has so many fascinating points to it, which, I really seriously need to hear all of your feedback on it because of two reasons. Number one, how does it seem to you, if you've seen it like in the last couple years, for instance, does it seem really shocking to you in terms of this storyline of men who only date models, and then there's this one, and they're kind of like, unembarrassed about it all, like, yeah, of course, I just love beautiful women, it's very interesting. And then also there's this one particular character, Barkley, who films these models that he's having sex with secretly and tells Carrie that this is his real art because he is also a painter. He's splashing some paint and, like kind of in a slightly Jackson Pollock way, but not really, on a big canvas with Carrie talking about models. And then he's like, but this is my real art. And he shows her this wall of like super old fashioned, like 1960s televisions, and then shows Carrie video of him having sex with these different women who are models who Carrie says is like the entire fragrance section of Vogue magazine. And, what on earth? I mean, I'm just still in shock. Obviously, he would be in jail if this happened now, which, this is progress. Okay. But also Carrie has to really be like so kind of game. Like she just sits there and she's like, oh, and I just wonder what on earth Sarah Jessica was thinking. And I'm also wondering what on earth Gabriel Macht was thinking. I mean, he gets, in my mind, so much credit because his likability factor is so high that he somehow makes this character likable almost. I mean, not really, because no one doing this could really be likable, but like you really are, you're kind of with him and then you're like, oh my gosh. But like, then we see him again at the fashion show and Carrie's like, hey, like it's really fascinating. And I honestly think if it were not Gabriel Macht playing that character, I just don't even know how, I just can't even picture it even being remotely palatable in any way. So credit to you, Mr. Macht. I can totally see how you have a very successful career on Suits and all the other things. I don't even know. And I really wish I had gotten to work with you because you were great. But wow, I'm sorry you had to play this part. You can tell how I feel about this character and this storyline. And I just also feel for Sarah Jessica. And I just can't wait to ask her, what on earth were you thinking when you had to do this and be fine with it? And what I think about it is that one of the things I think as a kind of a thematic idea of watching the beginning of the show is one of the things that we were struggling with, though I don't think we would have had the words for it at the time, was whose gaze is this story or show for and or by? Is it the male gaze? Is it the female gaze? Are we trying to be somehow filling this area that HBO has carved out for itself of having like kind of funny and slightly titillating shows like Dream On? Are we trying to do that for the men viewers, or are we trying to make a show about strong women navigating relationships in New York City, which obviously is what we turned into, thank goodness. But at the time, I don't think that we really knew. And part of the reason I bring this up is that coming up in a couple episodes is going to be a storyline where Charlotte is in a situation that I saw happening one way and the director saw happening a very, very different way. And I ended up having to lock myself in my dressing room and call my manager. And it was like 2 a.m. So Michael Patrick wasn't there. Sarah Jessica wasn't there. No one was there to help me. And I just had to like hide and call my manager and be like, what should I do? What should I do? What's happening? And it was very similar, the more active as this storyline that Carrie finds herself in terms of like something that normally I think you wouldn't see on television, right? I think that was kind of the thing too. Like we were trying to push the boundaries, and I feel like Candace in her column was also like trying to push the boundaries, but investigate like what is going on here? Can women have sex like men? What do you make of modelizers? Is it worth trying to like push through that with a man? Let's see you meet a man in New York, which could still happen. Okay, these dudes are 100% still there. I mean, there's some famous ones. I'm not going to say their name. I know you all know who I mean. Like, I think it's really fascinating. And I don't know that it's been answered yet. Like, why? Like, why? Why would a man only date models? That is interesting. Okay. Is it like Carrie says about the status? Is it making them feel stronger, more powerful, better, that they have kind of a trophy kind of person on their arm? But I also feel like there is this storyline kind of subtext going on, or actually, I think we actually say it in the episode of like that they're not that bright, because the whole storyline with Josh Pace, who's so funny as Nick, who is the main modelizer of the episode, who takes Miranda on a date because his friends gang up on him and tell him that they want him to bring a woman who can actually have a conversation, which is kind of funny. And so he brings Miranda, and then she finds out. And then it shows these beautiful women that he's previously brought, and they can't even really converse with his friends who are not models, right? So it does kind of continue on this kind of idea that beautiful women can't be smart, which is not fair either, right? So like we've got some different things that we're toying with in this episode, which I think are fascinating, but also I don't know that we go deep enough. I think that's what I think. I mean, I love these two beautiful women, because we're still in the talking to the camera phase, right? So at one point we got cut to a restaurant and there are two beautiful women, and one of them says, oh God, I was hopeful for a second. She goes, I mean, people just don't think we're smart, and I read all the time. And I'm like, yay. And then she says, I read sometimes a magazine from cover to cover. And I'm like, boo. So like, this whole episode for me was really up and down, really up and down. Now, let's cut to, for a second, we now have the transition happening of Sarah Jessica's hair. It's brown in the pilot, which I personally love, maybe selfishly, because obviously I'm a brunette. And she's now blonde, but it's not as blonde as she ends up, right? It's kind of in transition. She's got like really light highlights around her face. I think it's so adorable. And at one point she has ponytails, and it's so cute. This is when we get Pat Field as our costume designer. So you don't totally see Pat's influence straight out in this episode. And I remember it being very much a process, right? Like Pat had never really done a television show. She does not think like a regular costume designer at all. She thinks like a fashion designer, but also like kind of an avant-garde fashion designer. So like for me, in the one scene that I'm in, I'm wearing my own clothes. Okay. Now, they're not good. All right. They're really not good. And I'm sorry. I apologize. And very soon in real life, Darren takes me out to dinner. Maybe these 2 episodes, or maybe the next 2 episodes, I'm not sure, because I'd started going to my fittings with Pat, and it was stressful. Okay, I don't know how else to put it. It was stressful for me because I came from, more traditional theater and TV and more traditional costume designers, and you would have a fitting in a costume room at a studio or, wherever you were filming, and there'd be clothes there and you'd try them on. Pat did not work like that. I remember going to stores with Pat and Rebecca, her assistant / girlfriend / wife, and Molly Rogers, who's still our costume designer now, was also around. And we're going to talk to Molly soon. And I cannot wait. Okay. I cannot wait because she was around for all of it. But it was a process with Pat. And I remember going to stores and they would have a stack of cash in their hand that they couldn't hold in their hand. It was a big stack of cash, okay? And they'd carry it in a bag. And the reason I remember this is because at one point we left it somewhere and we had to go back and get it. I mean, honestly, like, what on earth, all right? What on earth? It's so crazy to think about. But like, we would go to like Bergdorf and I would just be like, I would just be so riddled with anxiety. We'd be looking at all the, Dolce & Gabbana and whatever. And I didn't think I could wear this, And also we didn't really know who Charlotte was. Charlotte, as I said last time, when you read the book of Candace's column, she's not formed. She's not cohesive. And later on, I think Candace either told me or said in an interview, I have no idea, that Charlotte was based on numerous different friends. So it was really hard to tell, who exactly is Charlotte. Like part of the reason I think I only have one scene is that, whatever this idea was to make me a recurring role instead of a series regular role, which I probably should have explained in more detail because there are some whacked headlines out there, which I find so frustrating because I just want to come on here and talk freely to you guys who love the show. I somehow thought that if it was me talking that they would not misinterpret what I was saying, but I guess that was naive. A little bit of Charlotte happening here because there's some very strange headlines in the world about what I said last time. So I hope you guys are just here with me. I'm going to try to explain the contract thing a little bit more. Basically, the big contract that you have to sign before you test for a pilot is very negotiated, very lengthy, for 7 years because they want to lock you up. Because if you are on a show that turns into a hit, that's obviously incredibly important for a network and they need to keep the players, available to them, right? So back then, especially pre-streaming, this was very important. So when they knocked on my door and said, "Oh, we have this paperwork you need to sign," had I signed the paperwork, it would have made my big 7-year contract null and void. That's why I didn't sign it. So it's not that they only paid me $5,000 for the pilot, which I think is some headline. I don't know. That's not true because I did not sign the $5,000 paperwork, right? I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. What paperwork? What? I left it at home. Oh my God. I did a lot of acting. Okay. There's a lot of acting in my trailer about that paperwork. I knew that it was a risk because clearly there was some thought that maybe Charlotte wasn't integral to the story of Sex and the City, and I felt like she was, and I'm, grateful that I had that confidence. I don't know why I have that confidence or had that confidence, but I'm very, very grateful that I did. It came from above, I guess. I don't know, but they basically would have only used me when they felt they had a storyline, I think is the point, right? So recurring means that you were not booked for all 13. So I would have gone home to LA and waited for them to call me and say like, "Oh, we have a storyline for you in episode 5 or whatever," something like that, right? So like when I see myself in this one scene in this episode, which I didn't even remember at all, but when I see myself in this one scene, I'm like, oh, they did not know what to do with Charlotte, which I also, from this vantage point, understand because she makes no sense in the book, really. The whole wanting to get married, her coming from a more traditional background and wanting to recreate that, her going to Smith, she's from Connecticut, all things that we know about Charlotte now, we did not know that then. So she was not formed. We didn't know how to dress her. I remember being with Pat and Rebecca in one of these stores and they've got this beaded Dolce tight wiggle skirt, as Pat would say. And I was like, I can't wear this. And she's like, yes, you can. And, she was right. Of course she was right. And so at some point, Darren Star takes me out to dinner and he says, "Kristin, you have got to let Pat Field dress you. You've got to just do what she says." And I'm like, okay, all right. I'm just, nervous. I don't know these clothes. I don't know if I can pull it off, which was all totally true. And he said, it doesn't matter. She is going to dress you better than you're going to dress yourself. And I was like, okay, sure. So when I see myself in that episode wearing my own outfit, which I believe I went out and got at Fred Siegel, which is also kind of adorable and funny and so 90s. Any of you who are my age remember Fred Siegel and how that was like the spot for all of us people in Los Angeles to go and spend our money. I just think it was a whole process with Pat. And when I see Sarah Jessica wearing the incredible dress that she wears to the fashion show, it's like a black dress with these kind of silver jewelry chain pieces that hang off the back. Oh God, that she ends up with Derek in, which we've got to talk about Derek. Oh my gosh, you guys. So she goes, okay, backtrack to the episode. So we've met the Gabriel Macht character. Carrie's trying to do her research on modelizers. She goes to a modelizer to ask him about this. This is Gabriel Macht, who is, I guess, like an Uber modelizer. Let's go with that, okay? / artist. Just being kind, all right? So then she goes to a fashion show with Samantha, and they run into Gabriel Macht's character, Barkley, at this fashion show. And Carrie is wearing this fantastic dress that she wears to the after party where she runs into Big, which is so incredibly likable, I have to say. The two of them, I really like them a lot. And it was nice to remember their original kind of chemistry and the way that it was written, where they just kind of keep running into each other, but it's like casual, but then you can see that she lights up whenever she sees him. I mean, I really liked it. And I was surprised that I really liked it because it's a long time ago and I didn't really remember how cleverly it unfolds. You know, it's not like a television storyline. It's more like a film storyline, but also set against this backdrop of Manhattan, right? Where like you would theoretically run into people in your same social circle out at events and whatnot. Anyway, back to the modelizer. So they run into Gabriel Mock's character Barclay at this fashion show, and Samantha, really with incredible confidence, decides that, you know, she is up to the challenge of dating someone who literally only has sex with models, as Carrie tells her. And, you know, you gotta really have a lot of respect for how Kim plays Samantha with such kind of a light touch, but also this incredible confidence that, yes, she is going to seduce this modelizer, even though she's not a model, and that she likes that challenge. And then when Carrie tells her later, no, you can't do that because he secretly films the people he has sex with, she's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Like, it's crazy. And she does it so lightly, like with ease, is what I was thinking when I was watching her. And obviously, wow, you know, I still can't quite get over the whole filming situation. But you know what? I think what's happening, and I guess we'll have to ask everybody, but what's happening, I think, is that Candace, originally in her column, is trying to say, you know, that we need to like pull the cover off of sexuality and relationships and what's really going on and talk about it, which obviously our show then did as well over the years in different ways. And here in this early version, by Samantha saying like, no, I want to do this. I'm doing this on purpose because I'm choosing to do this. I think that Samantha, and the show, I guess, is like trying to take the power back, I think. I'm not sure. I want to know what you guys think about this, because obviously this is something where you can say, oh, wow, look at that show filmed in like basically, I want to say 1998, and how different things are now, that would not be okay to secretly film people and consider it your art, like you're going to eventually show someone. Like, it's very whacked, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that everyone feels this. And the other thing I thought about when I was watching it is that I do tend to think, like, sometimes I'll meet young women or my friends' daughters, and they'll say like, oh, I've just started watching the show and I love it. And I'll be like, oh, thank you. I'm so glad you love it. Like, are you learning a lot? And they'll say, yes. I mean, I watched this show and I'm like, oh no, they're watching this. Oh no. You know, it doesn't seem necessarily like the most empowering situation that we're showing here. So it is really interesting to me, and I'm just dying to know what you guys all think. Whatever age you are, young, old, please tell me your thoughts on this whole situation. Let me get my paper out because we are going to talk about Skipper and Miranda. I mean, wow. You know, there's so much here. My biggest favorite thing. Oh my gosh, Carrie's wearing her coat. Let's talk about the coat for a second as well. This is when we first see Carrie wearing her vintage fur coat that Pat got her. I think they found it in like just a really no-name store. We did recently get it back out on And Just Like That. And it was a true vintage fur coat. And I hope I'm allowed to say this. I'm really sorry if I'm not, but we eventually did get in a lot of trouble with PETA about it. I don't really like to wear fur. I think I'm okay to say this as well. Pat, back in the day, really loved fur. And every year, what would happen with us scheduling wise is that we'd come back to work in roughly February to start filming. The show would come on HBO in June and then play through the summer. So we had to pretend in February like it was summer weather. But obviously, it really was not, right? So Pat would always think like, wouldn't it be great to put them in some fun fur coats? I could try to do my Pat impression, but I don't want to really annoy you guys. She has a very distinctive voice, I'm sure you know. But every year at the beginning, she would try to get me into a fur coat. And every year I would beg her, please, Pat, no, please, Pat, no, please, no, please, no, anything but that. But she would just be like, oh, all of you are going to be in fur. It's going to be great. And I remember having to go to, I can't remember which store, like a Bergdorf or maybe Barney's, but I don't think Barney's had a fur section. It was like a whole section of fur coats. And she was like, you have to come here. So I go. She puts this chinchilla wrap cape on me. And she's like, it's fabulous. Her favorite compliment was to say, it's tea. So I go to the store. I put on this chinchilla wrap. And she's like, it's so tea. And I'm like, oh, God, help me. So I'm like, I go home. I literally have nightmares that the chinchillas have come alive and that they're crawling all over me. So I go to work the next day and I'm like, please, Pat, I can't sleep thinking about those chinchillas, please. I'm begging and begging. So what she would compromise on is that I would wear shearling. So like there's a really popular pink shearling jacket that I wear one year that people still love to this day, which for me seems very random out of all of the fantastic things I ever wore, that they love this pink shearling coat. But that was Pat's compromise, that I didn't have to wear like mink or chinchilla or whatever it was. But we initially see Carrie in her really fabulous, I can totally understand that this was a special coat. And of course, Sarah Jessica has this unbelievable gift of style, like just innate personal style, where, you know, she can wear a pair of sweatpants and you do not realize that they're sweatpants because of whatever she has done to them and put with them and accessorized with them. They just look amazing. This is just her personal like special talent. Okay. Obviously you all know that, but in terms of this vintage fur, that's definitely what's happening here. Like if you or I went into this store and saw this vintage fur and we put it on, I don't know that it would be so fantastic. Also coming up, I think soon, they put me in a vintage outfit. I love vintage clothes, you guys. Always have loved vintage clothes. One of the 2 notes that I know of coming from HBO is do not put Charlotte in vintage. Very interesting. You're going to see why when we get to it. It did not play so well on the camera. I mean, I'm sure we could have figured it out, but they were like, do not put Charlotte in vintage. And I also kind of understand, like, it's like, you know, like kind of too on point in a weird way. But that was kind of sad for me because I do love vintage. But the first time that we see the coat, Carrie is walking with Skipper down the street, and Skipper is going on about Miranda and how much he loves her and how he's been calling her and calling her and calling her, and she won't call him back. And then he gets out the most hysterical cell phone you've ever seen in your life, which I have such memories of. And Carrie pulls the antenna up with her teeth, which is like so enjoyable, you guys. And he flips open the thing, like it's just so great. And I remember these things so well. And for us, we were just so thrilled to have them. Like, you know, to have an actual cell phone, as clunky and strange as it was, very exciting in the day. So they call her together, and Carrie looks kind of nervous, like she understands that Skipper is being like too needy and that Miranda is not going to be into it, but she doesn't quite know how to tell Skipper because he's like, you know, very puppy energy and, you know, like pick me. And so then, you know that Miranda has gone out with the modelizer, right? Which is obviously not a wise choice, but how was she to know? And so she kicks him to the curb, thank goodness. And she's so funny. I mean, I didn't even talk about the group scene. Oh my gosh, you guys, welcome to my mind. So we have to back up. We have to back up to the group scene, the one scene that Charlotte's in. I do have so many memories of the scene because it was the first time that we're in Carrie's apartment. We have Carrie's real apartment, though it also shows the coffee shop sign in neon from the pilot. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of the old with the new. But it is Carrie's apartment, though it's not fully worked out yet, but it's like the blueprint, the set that we would come to know and love. And we're all together. It is the one and only time that we were told that we could ad-lib. After that, it never happened again. It was very, very, very frowned upon after this, but it was the sweetest reason why. In this particular scene, we're talking about models and men who only date women who are models, and you know how we feel about that or whatever. Does it make us feel less than? I think it's something like that Carrie asked us. And then we were each supposed to say what we felt insecure about, and the writers didn't want to write that on paper. So that was very sweet of them not to want to write what they thought that we would feel self-conscious about, to let us ad-lib what we felt self-conscious about, which was really kind. It was also like 4 a.m. This was the beginning of the pilot actually, I think when I'm on the stairs of the Met, it's like 4 a.m. We filmed all night long, almost all the time. We would start Monday at 5 a.m. and each day would get longer and longer because we had night exteriors. Because as you remember, a lot of the show in the beginning, especially, we're out and about at night. We're on the streets at night, blah, 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 blah. So we had to wait for nighttime, which meant we had to film later and later as the week went on. So as the week went on, like we'd film probably Wednesday night till 2, Thursday night till 4. By the time we got to Friday night, we would film until the sun came up on Saturday every single week. And then you'd have to turn yourself back around by Monday morning to go to work at 5. It was a lot, okay? And also back then, we really felt like we could never say this publicly, like that we just had to be like, we're fine, we're great. We love our show so much and we're having so much fun. Because that's what everyone would always say, like, isn't it so much fun? You'd be like, yes. Now, mind you, also on the weekend, I had a pair of shoes that was a whole size too big because my feet would be so swollen because I wasn't used to wearing these shoes. Everyone always says like, oh, the shoes. I'm like, yeah, it's hard. It's a thing. It's not just like easy. And this is obviously a long time ago. So I would have a certain pair of shoes I would wear all weekend that my feet could just be swollen in. And then hopefully by the end of the weekend, the short weekend, they would be back ready at 5 a.m. on Monday to be putting those Manolos back on. But it did take Pat a little while to get me the Manolos. So right when we see this first episode, I'm wearing some boots. I think they're mine. I don't know. They're not good. Okay. Pat has not worked her magic on me yet. It's begun and I'm stressing about it, but it has not really fully happened. So when we do this scene in Sarah Jessica Carrie's apartment, sorry, I can't keep us straight. It is the wee hours and we are ad-libbing, and absolutely Kim ad-libs. Like she like touches Cynthia's face at one point or whatever. I mean, it was really, I just remember giggling and that it was fun and exciting. And then I also thought, and this is just because I'm the only one here right now, I'm going to tell you my own thoughts on myself. Previous to this show, I had been on, I had done some guest star things in between, but I'd been on Melrose Place, Darren's other show, right? And when you were on an Aaron Spelling soap opera, there were a lot of rules. And the rules were non-negotiable. And the rules had to do with the fact that they wanted to do 3 sizes of a camera shot on you, one of which was a super close-up that would literally cut your hairline off, right? Like be like your eyes and your mouth. And to do that, you had to hold really still. So I played this character, Brooke, who worked in this office with Billy and Allison on Heather Locklear's character. And I used to say like, oh, couldn't I have some props? And they'd say like, well, why would you want some props? And I'd be like, well, we're working, right? Like, aren't I, like, should I write something down? They'd be like, no, don't do that. And I'd be like, why? Why wouldn't I write something down? Aren't I supposed to be working? And they were like, well, you can't look down. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean I can't look down? Now, mind you, I'd spent the last 15 years in acting class where they're just trying to talk to you about being natural and doing things and, being not self-conscious or whatever. And so then you're on a show that's like, no, you can't look down. You can't have props. You can't do anything. You have to just stare at the other person like hardcore, okay? And you can't change your hair. That was the other Aaron Spelling thing because he didn't want hair in your face because he wanted to see your eyes. Okay, now I kind of get it because eyes are the windows to the soul. But on the other hand, as an actor, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to do that. So when I watch myself in the scene with everybody in the group scene, I'm just trying to be natural. I'm just trying to be present. I'm eating, I'm touching my hair, I'm touching my face. I'm, just trying to be like unself-conscious. And in the show that we're trying to make, which is much more realistic. You know what I'm saying? Like not like TV in the way that I was, previously in. So that was one of the things I thought about watching the 4 of us with the Chinese food. Like, yes, I'm eating. That was a big thing on our show. Yes, we always ate. No, I can't think of a time we had a spit bucket because we're in a scene. You can't stop and spit food out in a spit bucket. That doesn't work. You have to keep talking. As you know, it's going to be a Miranda-like signature. I mean, they would like challenge her, like, how much food can you get in your mouth? And Cynthia was ready. She was ready. She was like, I'm going to go for it. And we'd all be like, oh my God, maybe it's too much. She'd be like, no. But it's so much fun to watch. So to me, all of that is there in the beginning. Okay, Skipper, and Miranda are adorable. So he's there. I don't even know that we ever have a guy character who is like him again. I don't think we do, where he's just like calling her and calling her and calling her and kind of needy, and everyone's thinking it's not going to work out. Then they run into each other in the bodega, which is also so New York and so adorable. And he very beautifully tells her at the checkout that she's luminous. And she is luminous. And it just melts her cold heart. So it's such a great, great, great scene. And I love it so much. And then he wants to finish paying for his Captain Crunch, I believe, or something. And she's like, there's cereal at my house, which is so great. There's cereal at my apartment, I believe she says. It's so classic and great. So for me, there are such great, great, great moments in this episode where you really see this huge potential, but then there's also just really, really strange things like this dude who's filming models secretly having sex with him, right? So it's a very mixed thing. But the other thing I was going to say is that, so we filmed these whole, we'd done the pilot, obviously, and then we filmed 12 more episodes before anything came on the air. And one of the great things is that HBO allowed us to find ourselves, right? So like we would kind of, shift this way and shift that way. And one script might seem more pushing the boundaries, like I would say this episode. And then a different script might seem more comedic. And I remember Darren, sometimes he would come down the writers' rooms in the studio where we were in Silver Cup at this point on Long Island City. It's still there. It used to be a bread factory. It's a very charming place. It's kind of falling down, but we love it. And he would come down sometimes and he'd be like, you guys got to be sexy. You got to be sexy. And I'd say like, me? Really? Me? Are you sure? Me? And he'd be like, yes, all of you, all of you. And we'd be like, okay. And we'd kind of look at each other. And then a different week he'd come down and he'd be like, you guys got to be funny. You got to be funny. And we'd be like, okay. Is there a rewrite? Like, did something change in the script? He'd be like, no, just make it funny. We'd be like, okay, Darren, okay. So there was, definitely a growing period of the show. And the fact that HBO allowed us to kind of, slightly flail around a bit. I hope it's okay that I'm saying this. Because when I watch them, I am really just like, it's been a long time. I vaguely remember this stuff, but like I 100% did not remember this filming the model secretly part. Like it is crazy. But I do also feel like, we've come a long way in some of these areas. I mean, some of these areas we haven't, and then some of these areas we have. And I think back then, I think that relationships and sexuality were kind of seen from the male gaze more often than not, at least in entertainment, right? So like in films, because that's really where you saw sexuality. You didn't really see it in television so much, right? So that was kind of one of the ways that we started pushing that boundary. And then what I think happened, what my perspective on it is that as we kind of found ourselves and Michael Patrick came and other writers came, more women writers came, we became more grounded in the fact that we were about investigating things from the female perspective and not from the male gaze, not from the male perspective where we're just trying to kind of deal with it and make the best of it as we can, which is what I feel like poor Carrie is trying to do in that one scene with the dude, she's like, ha, 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 like kind of nervously laughing, but she's sitting there, it's very fascinating. But then she definitely tells Samantha, like, do not go there. You know what I mean? So it's not like she thought, oh, it's fine. Right. So it's, I think, a very interesting thing. And I think something that we'll be talking about more. And I'm super curious what you guys think of it. Meaning those points of like, did you feel uncomfortable watching that? Or did you feel like, oh yeah, this stuff happens and let's uncover it. Let's see it. Let's see it for what it is. And I do think also that it should be said that I think that Candace had a very non-judgmental, quality. She was like, I'm a social anthropologist and I'm uncovering what's going on and I'm not judging it. And in that way, she was kind of ahead of her time, I would say. I feel like now, in many ways, society is much more non-judgmental and like, well, this is what you're into, but also there has to be consent, hopefully. I mean, that's how I feel, at least as someone with a daughter. I think we're there. I don't know. What do you guys think? I want to know from you guys. All right. Those were my stream of consciousness thoughts about episode 2, season 1, Models and Mortals. Thanks for being with me, everyone. Next week, we have an amazing guest. Ooh, I can't wait. All right. Bye.